Hey everyone, this is Sebastian here from 8base, and today what I'm going to be doing is walking you through how to get set up with our Vue 2 starter app so that in just a few minutes you can have a fully functioning Vue.js application that has authentication pre-enabled as well as an API connection to an 8base workspace, so you can just start developing your front-end application really fast. Let's get into it. Cool. So here in the 8base GitHub is where we have the Vue 8base starter application, and I'll put the link in the description of the video so that you can access it easily. However, there's a README that walks through these steps, but I'm going to walk you through it and then just point out some things inside the repository to help contextualize the way it's structured and just to help make some sense of it. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually clone down the repo. So I'm just going to copy the repo link and then open a new terminal window. Now inside here, I'm going to move into my code. 8base temp folder, where here I don't have any projects, and I'm going to go into git clone the repo here, and I'm just going to leave it the same name. So once that is copied to my computer locally, boom, I'm going to move into that directory and just run npm install. So as of today, which is June 17th, 2022, all the dependencies are up to date. If you're watching this video a year from now, hopefully no issues are running, but we'll also try to keep the starter app up to date as frequently as possible, as well as roll more of these out with different frameworks. Cool. So that installed successfully. And now if we go to the starter app README, we can see that it says run npm install and then create a local environment variable file. So we're going to have to create these environment variables. So I'm just going to copy the template for them. And then here I'm just going to say touch.env.local just for our local environment variables. And then I'm going to use the pb paste command, I think. Yeah, into that .env.local folder. Cool. And so now if we see the contents of our environment variable file, got it. We have all the environment variables in there that we need. We just need to set the values now. So at this point, I'm actually going to open up the app in my IDE, which I can stretch out there. Cool. And I'm going to open a terminal window. So I have that. Awesome. So let's just open the environment variables file so we just knock this out of the way. So it's running on port 3000. You can change the port depending on whatever port you want to run your app on. However, there's 5 environment variables that we need to set. The workspace endpoint, so that's your API endpoint for the workspace or workspace environment that you want to work with. The auth profile ID and the client ID, and the auth client domain, which we're all going to get from authentication profile, and then separately the workspace ID. If we wanted to, technically, we could use one to create the other, but we're just creating them all as separate variables right now. So let's go back to the browser, and here I'm in one of my 8base workspaces that I use in a lot of these tutorials called Supertask Backend. So it could be any workspace, doesn't really matter. I'm going to go first to my home, and I'm going to get the Workspace API endpoint. And so let's copy that one over. Cool. And I'm just going to snag the Workspace ID right off the end of that. Cool. And since I have CI/CD enabled in this workspace, you can see that the environment name multi-tenant is at the end of this workspace ID. You may not have that if you're just using a developer workspace or dev workspace, but no, that's why there's a funky name on the end of there. Next, I'm going to go into my app services and create a new authentication profile. Now in here, I'm just going to call this Vue. I don't know why I pronounced it weird, but Vue app auth profile. We leave it as 8base authentication. Once again, we have some other guides on how you could set it up with Auth0 or Cognito. It all works the same way, but we'll just use 8base auth for now. I'm just going to say anyone can sign up for this app, and anyone that does sign up is going to have the user role. Add that profile, and now that gave us all the other information that we need to set. So first off is the auth profile ID. So I'm going to snag that and drop that in the auth profile ID field or variable. The client ID, which I can get from here. And then finally, the domain. So I'm going to stack the domain. Cool. So now with all our environment variables set, I'm just going to open another terminal in case I want to get back to here. I'm going to run npm run start. Oh, 1 second. What's the right command? Serve. Excuse me. npm run serve. Cool. Starting up our development server. And now the app is running at localhost. So cool. So now we have our app. And as we can see, it says you need to log in. So that's kind of the hint that there's authentication there. We have a few different pages. So the view router is installed, as well as then we have the profile, which is disabled because we're not logged in. So I'm going to go and sign in, which brings me to the hosted login page, which in this case is offered by Cognito. That's what's happening behind the scenes for Apis at this point, or Apis Auth. And I'm going to sign up as a user. So here I'm just going to say, I'm going to use my one random inbox account, Sebastian Scholl. And, oh, you know what? Before I do that, I'm going to delete myself as a user. So that, yeah, in this workspace, I was already there. So that there's not a conflict. If I had done that, it would just say that you already signed up, right? So we're just avoiding that. So sign up. Cool. And then I'm going to give it a super secret password. And I'm going to sign up. Cool. So it redirected me back to the application. Now I'm logged in, and it's returning me my user data, showing that I've now been created and signed up as an authenticated user. Now we can see that the profile is available, and that's actually using an API request to go get my information from the base backend, showing that I'm authenticated via the API. Now, so everything works. At this point, you could jump in to the Vue.js app and start building whatever you want to build, right? It's like a really easy to get started starter app. Now, a couple things. So first off is that there's a folder in the root directory called 8base. And inside here, there is an index file which you can import everything from. So it just imports the two different modules that we're using, which is the API module and the Auth module. And then here we have the API, which here we can see that we're using Apollo client. And so this is just a configuration of Apollo client, which works pretty well. So it has the link for the API, which is where it's getting that environment variable. It has an error handler for GraphQL errors or network errors, which you can change as you need. And then it sets the context with a function. So whenever a API request is made, it goes and tries to get the ID token that's stored in the state, which brings us to the next thing, which is that Vuex is being used as the state management system. So if you go to the store modules, here we can see that we have one module being set in the Vuex store, which is the session. And so if I go to the session module, here it's all set up for storing the ID token and storing an authenticated state, which you kind of saw, being used in the front end a little bit. So handling mutations for whether the user is authenticated, logging in, logging out, as well as one thing that's important to understand is that when you authenticate with an auth provider, right, the auth provider is saying that this is returning the token saying that this person successfully authenticated. So when we handle authentication on the front end, we get that token back. And the first thing that we actually want to do is set that token as a bearer token and then make an API request to 8base to say, hey, show me the current user. And we want to catch that because if there isn't that user in the 8base database yet, we want to then create that user because we know it's their first time signing in. It's like their first time signing up. So we catch that error and then we run a mutation that signs up the user using the auth profile ID that they authenticated with, and then in this case their email address, but you could throw any other data in there to add it to the user record. And that's how the user gets signed up, and then we commit it run the what's it called? The mutation, which authenticates them, which is just parsing out the data and storing it. So then after that API module, we have the Auth module, which essentially just is importing the 8base SDK. We tell it the strategy we're using, which is Web 8base Cognito. And here it's just setting some different settings, which we have documentation for that breaks down, essentially pulling in those different environment variables and then setting the login redirector URL and the redirect URI. Now, it's important to note that you will get an error if these aren't properly set, and they get properly set inside your backend at the auth profile in the allowed callback URLs and the allowed logout URLs. So, pretty straightforward. Everything after that is really pretty cookie cutter. You have views, you have utils. This is just organized in a little way to make it more convenient to use. However, as a Vue.js developer, you can dive into here and have a field day and reorganize it, restructure it all however you want. All right. So I hope that this helped you get a good understanding of how easy it is to get started with the starter app. If you want to do Vue.js development using Api's backend. Api's backend is really like a fantastic solution for building apps with Vue.js as a front-end technology. It just allows you to really focus in on building an amazing user experience with Vue.js, while a lot of the backend concerns are being handled for you. So with that said, if you found this video helpful, please like it. If you want to get updates when future videos come out, please subscribe to the channel. Happy developing and looking forward to seeing you in future episodes.